So welcome everybody to today's webinar. We will be concentrating today on a couple of things. The new bounce back loans I'll discuss a little bit in a minute, and then be handing over to a couple of my partners who will be discussing what's been happening with furloughing, in particular, some quirks around some calculations and submissions that we've gleaned from doing hundreds and hundreds of these along the way for our clients. We shall start with the bounce back loans. This was something that was announced by the government a couple of days back to help smaller businesses, or actually we're not quite sure what size of businesses is going to help yet, but they're certainly for smaller loans. These loans are between £2,000 and £50,000. Up to 6 years, and with, like the main loans, there's going to be no interest or fees for the first 12 months and no loan repayments within the first 12 months either. They've said there'll be a low standardized level of interest for the remaining period of the loan, but there's been no detail on that yet. And a key issue of this is that the government will provide the lenders with 100% guarantee for the loan. I really think this will strike a chord with a lot of businesses of all different sizes that should be able to get some quick funding. Eligibility will be that you've got to be based in the UK and that you have been negatively affected by coronavirus, and that the business was not what they're calling an undertaking in difficulty on the 31st of December last year. Certain businesses can't apply: banks, insurers, public sector, and some state-funded primary and secondary schools. If you have been quick off the mark and already applied for a coronavirus business interruption loan scheme, you can merge the two in. If it's under £50,000 that you've received, you can flip that across to the bounce back loan and arrange a top up for the remaining £50,000. I think you've got until the 4th of November to switch that back in. The loan scheme itself doesn't launch until next Monday, the 4th, and lots of details are still to be issued. They're saying that the process will be easy through a short standardized online application, and that the loan should reach the business within days. That remains to be seen because the existing process for the main CBILS loans is quite long-winded and the forms are crazy. So, like I said before, hopefully this will make things an awful lot easier. More details are not out there yet. There's some things that have been in the press, but we're not quite sure because they haven't been validated with government things. Some are saying there's not going to be any viability test, although some fraud checks have got to be done. That was from Sky. There was an initial thing that came out limiting the size of business to a £200,000 turnover. I think there's going to be some kind of percentage of turnover test up to 25% of turnover, which is where the 200,000 comes from, but it's not yet clear if businesses larger than £200,000 of turnover can still apply, but obviously at a lower percentage. I really hope that is the case, and I'm kind of expecting it to do that. So we will see. That is really all we have on the bounce back loans. I'm really hoping it will be quick and easy and the money will come through quickly, because that's desperately needed. We will issue more details as soon as it's out, and we will be on it with our clients and anybody else that needs help as from Monday. So watch this space, and we're here to help. So that's it for the bounce back loans. I'm now going to pass over to one of my partners, Stephen, who's going to kick off the session on furloughing with some details and explanations of what's been going on. So hopefully Stephen is going to fire up his camera.
Yep, I'm here.
Take over. Here we go. Right, I'll leave you to it.
All right. Thanks, Neil. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So I've had the pleasure, together with one of my other partners, Ben, of actually processing a number of these claims to help certainly our clients out. So I've seen at the sharp end what is going on with these claims, and rather than just think, just reinvent the wheel and explain everything for furlough from the beginning. I just wanted to draw on, certainly for those of you who are trying to do furlough claims yourselves, on 2 or 3 things that I've certainly come across and that may assist in things for you to consider. Ben will then speak after me, Ben Chernoff, one of my other partners, about actually how it actually works via the portal itself. So to kick off, one of the first things I wanted to speak on was the nuance in April, unlike March claims, which you may have made already, in April in connection to the employment allowance. So the employment allowance, I'm sure you're aware, £4,000 allowance on the employer's NI, first £4,000 that you normally spend in the year. Nothing to do with furloughing, just a standard employment allowance that companies get. You have to be under paying up £100,000 a year in employer's NI, but assuming you're under that, you should normally be getting that. So a question has arisen amongst, certainly in accounting circles, as to should that employment allowance be applied in April or not. So why is that a question? Well, if the employment allowance is applied in April, then if that is applied to individuals that have been furloughed, then then the furlough claim will subsequently be smaller for you. So you have to weigh up between, do you want to take the employment allowance now, or get it now and get the cash now from PAYE, or delay it until a point in the future, perhaps August sometime, to and get the money then. So I've actually got a worked example just to explain how that will play out. So hopefully this will work. There you go. Thank you, Nick. So I just want, just hopefully you can have a look at here and see the work example. So I've used the example of someone that's on a salary of £2,500 a year. The employer's NI threshold is £732 starting from April. So if they did not apply the employment allowance in April, they could actually claim £2,500, the furlough salary, plus employer's NI on that individual of £244. So that's £2,744, as opposed to if they do apply the employment allowance, they'll only be able to claim £2,500, only the furlough, because of course the £244 would be absorbed in the employment allowance. So there are, of course, some caveats to this, which is that you do have to consider, if your furlough claim is actually very small, then you still would actually have to be paying out the PAYE to HMRC in those months, April. So if you've only got one employee that you're furloughing and you need the cash desperately, then of course you should absolutely apply the employment allowance. But if you don't need the cash, or your claim is going to be substantial, then certainly it's been advised that, and I think I've got it here from the ICAW tax faculty, I'm just reading it here, that suggests it's maybe simpler to not claim the employment allowance at all until later into the tax year. So that's just a piece of advice on the employment allowance. The second thing that I wanted to just speak on was, and it's just come up a few times with clients that are doing the payrolls themselves in connection with calculating pensions auto-enrollment. So again, you may or may not be aware that as well as claiming the furlough payment and the employer's NI, as I've just referred to, the other thing you can claim is the 3% auto-enrollment element of the furloughed employee. And I have seen that that people have potentially made the mistake of simply simplifying and taking just 3% of the furloughed amount, which is incorrect. And again, I've got another example just to show up. If Nick, if we can get the slide up by magic. Thanks, Nick. So what the mistake that I've seen on a couple of clients do is that they've not factored in that you only start paying auto-enrollment amount after a lower level earnings limit, and that has to be factored into the calculation. So starting from April 20, the lower limit is £520. So again, I've just done an example here, £520, so 30 days in April divided by 30 is £17.33. So Nick, if you move it on to the next slide, if you don't mind. So I've just picked someone as an example who was on £600, was going to be furloughed £600, and they were furloughed from the 10th of April. Just as a point here, and I put it in exclamation mark, again, you need to be working these things out on calendar days, not the working days. So the furloughing, all of it is based on calendar days. So in this case, the individual's has been furloughed for 21 days. So we take the £17.33, which is this daily limit, multiply it by 21 days to give £363.93. So that effectively means they can't claim the auto enrolment for anything under £363.93. Oh, sorry. So you take the £600 that they've been furloughed, deduct the £363.93 that is the lower limit, and then that figure is what you times by 3%. So in this example, the employer pension contribution that they can claim is £7.08. Had they just done it straight, the furlough amount times by 3%, then they would have actually overclaimed and claimed £10.92. Yes, it's only £3.92, but nevertheless, it is an overclaim. So just as a point, a tip, and something that I have spotted on a couple of claims. So the last thing, certainly, that I will just be talking about is the change since we did this is now the third webinar we've done on furloughing, and the first one that we spoke on at the time, you could only furlough employees up to they were employed at the 28th of February. This was subsequently changed to the 19th of March, and there've been a couple of questions on this. One is, what if I recruited someone on the 1st of March? How does HMRC know that they've been employed on the 19th of March? Normally you do a submission, and HMRC would know when you submit the payroll at the end of the month. And the second one, again, a little nuance for certain companies, they may only be running an annual payroll, certainly for directors, and therefore they only do one submission a year, which would be at the end of March. So what would happen in that case? Well, we have done some test cases and test examples and run it through here at Davis Grant, and it's as long as one files and runs an FPS on the 19th of March that acknowledges that new employee or acknowledges the annual payroll, then it should be absolutely fine. So as long as you run that and submit that, then that should solve both of those issues. So they're the three really key points for me. I could rattle on for some time, but in the interest of time, I'll pass you over to my colleague Ben, who's just going to touch on now the aspects in relation to the practical points of entering the data on the portal.
Thanks, Stephen. And before Ben starts, I just wanted to remind everybody that we do have the question and answer button running. So if you did have any questions you want to submit, please fire away and we'll get to them once Ben's finished speaking. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Neil and Stephen. So as Stephen mentioned, I'm just going to touch on a little bit of how you actually file the claims and a few key points that we've found. As Stephen mentioned, me and him have both been filing a lot of Davis Grants claims and over the last couple of weeks, and the system, as amazing as it was that the revenue got this set up within kind of 3 to 4 weeks and has been paying claims, there's a lot of faults with the system, which I guess is expected. So the first, I guess, point is, how do you actually file the claims? How do you go about doing that? As your agents have a PAYE HMRC agent account, and we always ensure that we get all of our clients set up on the agent account, and we can file the claim on your behalf as agents. If you are filing the claim yourself, you can set up a HMRC PAYE account online. There used to be a need to request an authorization code in the post, but they've now removed that. The only one thing I would say on that, which we've had clients had issues on, is that if you have already set an account up a few years ago and you might have forgotten about it, or you had a previous accountant who might have set up the PAYE account for you, if you then go to set up a new account, but if you're already linked to another account, it won't let you log in. So you need to just ensure that you have any logins that you do already set up, and if not, you'll have to try and find them. So in terms of the actual claims themselves, when you go through onto the portal, it asks you a few kind of questions, which are quite straightforward questions about why you're kind of how you're furloughing, what's the reason, and that you're going to pay the money over to the employee. Kind of a few key things to look at. One, it does ask you for a company UTR number. If you're a sole trader partnership who's got an employee they're furloughing and you don't have a UTR number, it does still actually let you file the claim. So if you get to that step and you think, oh, I don't have one of these, actually, if you click no, you follow it through, it still does let you file the claim. You can only file one furlough claim for a period. So let's say you want to file your April furlough claim. Ensure you're including all of the amount for the whole of April, because let's say you miss an employee off of that claim, you can't then go and file a claim again for that period. The revenue haven't yet released making adjustments. They said you'd have to call them up to make any changes. If it's a small change, you might be able to just add it onto your next month's claim, but we would recommend calling the revenue. Again, each claim has to be for a minimum period of 3 weeks. So if you're on a weekly payroll, ensure you're doing 3 weeks at a time. The one part that is actually linked to another bit of the revenue system is the amount of employees that you're furloughing. So when you go through online, it asks you how many employees to furlough. Let's say you've got 2 employees and for some reason you put 4, because it's linked to their POIE system, it comes up and says, how are you furloughing 4 staff when you only have 2 employees on your payroll? So that comes up there. You need the full names and national insurance numbers of all your employees, so make sure you've got that before you go to do the claim. And it also asks you for the business bank account details and the address that's linked on. A lot of people think that is the bank address. It's not. It's actually the business address that your bank is registered to. It does actually give you the option to pay it to your personal account, but we'd recommend to try and pay it to the business account. Because for some reason they didn't allow you to enter an email address, and it doesn't send you a confirmation. So once you get to the end and you've entered all your amounts and all the employees' details, it then brings you to a summary sheet. Highly recommend, and we've kept track of all of the claims that we submitted, that you either print that summary or save the summary, because if in 6 months' time HMRC do inquire into one of the claims, you need to have some backing as what you've actually filed. Again, once you then click file, it comes up, your total claim is 5,000, let's say, with a kind of an authorization number. Again, we'd recommend printing that and saving that if you ever need to refer back to it. All claims are being paid within 6 working days. That's a maximum 6 working days, so we've seen some being paid sooner than that, and we are trying to get all of our clients' claims filed as soon as possible, as time allows us. Just a couple of further points. If you start entering some of the information, it doesn't save the information. So after about 10-15 minutes, it kicks you off the website, and when you log back in, you have to start again from square one. So make sure you've got all the information ready to file before you log on to do the claim. Also, for each month, it doesn't hold any of the information, which seems a bit crazy. You've got your furloughing staff, let's say you've got 50 staff that you're entering the information for, and you've got to enter all the staff's full name, national insurance numbers. You have to do that each month. So as you can imagine, if you've got the big claims, it is quite time consuming. And lastly, the revenue do have a system in place where you have more than 100 employees, you can upload the claim in a spreadsheet. Why they haven't allowed that for kind of smaller claims, we're not too sure, and hopefully they will open that facility in the next kind of few weeks. So I'm going to pass you back over to Neil now. Like Neil said, any further questions, please do put them in the question and answer box.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Ben and Stephen. I think we're now all going to pop into the question and answer session. We've had a few coming through, we've had a few in the past from various people for clarification. So one that is very important is Ben growing a beard?
You should have seen what it was like last week.
I won't answer that one.
I am. That's it, yeah.
So have we got anybody that wants to pick up any of these questions? What kind of paperwork should I make? Should I make sure to keep to safeguard against future HMRC investigations? There's various paperwork that we're helping put out and that is out there. Generally, you need to have something in writing that the individual employee agrees to go on furlough. You need that whether they're an employee or a director, and there's a slightly different version for either. Also, if it is a director, then there's an issue about the fact that the director can't do very much apart from the statutory responsibilities. And there's a board minute that should go around to document that. And you should also keep paperwork to do with anything to do with the calculation and the basis on which you've worked things out. I think that, I mean, some of the points that Stephen was making were very valuable, and the thing is that this scheme underneath it is really complicated. Some of the bits and pieces are not straightforward. I'd like to think that a simple mistake or a mistake in principle or a mistake made with a calculation made earlier in the process when clarification wasn't out there aren't the kind of things that HMRC would be particularly bothered about in the future, obviously depending on the scale and the amount of that's involved. So I really think it's still important to keep all your calculations so you can demonstrate how you've got to where you are. Okay, guys, someone else want to pick up another question? So
yeah, so there's a question here. Can you provide an update on this furlough submissions, and once submitted, will Davis Grant or HMRC notify the company? So we've had a backlog of amendments to make for a lot of March payrolls, and also a lot of amendments for April payrolls. So the payroll team have been kind of under it the last 4 or 5 weeks, and we're nearly there. So a lot of the kind of March and April claims have now been submitted or will be submitted in the next few days. Again, for us to notify every client once they've been submitted, it's just taking a lot of time. So if you haven't yet been notified, or we haven't notified you that your payroll's been finished or the claim's been filed, if I would wait, especially if it's a March payroll, if maybe get in contact with us early next week, and we'll be able to update you where we are.
Yeah, all I would add, no, sorry, Ben, is just to say that as soon as any client is approving their payroll, we are submitting the grant claims almost on the same day.
Neil, I've got a question here. One of the questions is that what's the minimum period for furloughing? I think Ben mentioned the minimum period is 3 weeks, but there's nothing stopping an employee coming back after 3 weeks to come back to work if there is work required by the business, and he can come back and then be furloughed again, but the minimum period is 3 weeks.
I've had a question on the bounce back loans. What is the payback term? They are for up to 6 years. So no capital repayments for the first year, and then you can schedule it for up to 6 years. Suppose if you want it sooner than that, that would be acceptable. And we'll see what happens on Monday, how that system rolls through.
There's a question here. It says, I submitted my claim for 2 groups of employees that were furloughed at different times. Didn't realise that you could only submit for 1 period. Therefore, one set of dates was incorrect. I'm hoping they will pay anyway and query later. What do you think? Well, when you obviously we've got it where different in companies, employees have been furloughed at different dates in that month. And so when you do the claim, you just state the first point, the period of when the first individual was furloughed. If you are saying, if your question is that you had someone say, for example, in March, you submit in March, and now someone else you have furloughed that's also in March, then as Ben mentioned, I guess at the moment, one would have to make the call as to whether you want to put that into April's claim, because HMRC haven't given an option to either refile March's or an amendment one. So, you know, if it's a small amount, you may just want to put it into April's, or as Ben said, perhaps call up HMRC to get absolute confirmation.
Just picking up on a question regarding the chance of inquiry on these matters and the associated costs. Obviously, we've no idea as yet as to how the revenue are going to approach it. But my guess is, as they do with other inquiries, they'll look at it on a risk assessment basis. So obviously, the greater the claim, the more chance that the revenue will look at it. I also think they will start to deal with looking at furlough claims when they do normal compliance payroll inquiries. And that could be up to a few years down the line, where they can go back over 6 years. And if the furlough period fell into that period, they would then look at that with hindsight and double check your claim meets their criteria and is calculated correctly. And of course, if it was wrong, there could be interest and penalties. They may take a softly line if you can show that it was just a misinterpretation. But if there was premeditated fraud involved, they would obviously go in very harshly. In terms of any costs in dealing with it, it's totally dependent on time costs involved. But I would certainly recommend always having fee protection insurance, because that should cover you for all tax inquiries, as long as there's no fraud involved.
Just going to pick up on a question here that was, when will the companies need to pay back funds with regard to furlough payments? So the furlough payments is not a loan from the government, it is a grant. So they don't need to be paid back. It's also a taxable grant. So if you're making profits in that year, you'll be paying corporation tax on that grant money. And in terms of the classification, you should classify it as grant income or other income. So it won't need to be repaid to the government, because it's a grant, not a loan.
Just picking up on that, Ben, because I have been asked this by a couple of clients. Obviously, the furlough income that the company or the business receives is a credit against your wage costs. So it will reduce your wage costs in your accounts, and that's how you'll pay tax on it, because it will reduce your expenditure, which will increase your profit or reduce your loss. So that is taxable in that respect.
Yeah.
There was a question that says, when can we file for April payroll? The answer is as soon as your April payroll is complete and submitted. So there was earlier on when it first came out, the furlough, there was a little bit of confusion about whether you actually had to have paid your team, your staff first before you then claimed it. That's not the case. As long as you have submitted your payroll for April, and of course your intention is absolutely, and you will be paying your employees. And in fact, that's one of the questions when you're doing the claim on the portal, that you are actually going to be paying your employees, then you can submit April at any point. You can submit it now or any time in the future.
I can see there's a question about how will the furlough payments be treated if you're a partnership and the tax of the firm. So again, similar to the point I made earlier, that any payments received by the partnership, the business, for its employees will reduce the wage costs of the partnership, and therefore increase your profit accordingly.
There's another question on the bounce back loan. Someone said, understand they're not available if you are claiming under the CBILS loan. Made an application to their bank, but haven't had a response yet on the CBILS loan. Do we think that you can safely apply for the bounce back on Monday? Need the cash flow promptly, and don't expect to hear back on the CBILS for some time. That's one thing that has yet to be clarified, but you are right. It says that you can't apply if you are claiming under the interruption scheme. The definition of claiming has not yet been put out. Whether claiming means applying or claiming means you've actually got the loan in place, it's not clear. What I would do is see if you can withdraw the original loan application and go for the bounce back version. There is a bit of a mismatch there, because it does say that if you've got a CBILS loan of less than £50,000, you can switch that into the bounce back loan and apply for the rest of the 50,000. So I'm not quite sure what that means in practice, and that's something that will hopefully be clarified over time. But if you want to stop the CBILS loan process, I reckon that if you emailed your bank to say, please withdraw this application, and then you went ahead with the bounce back loan, I think that should probably cover it.
One question here: do the bounce back loans need a personal guarantee or guarantee at all? No, they're 100% guaranteed by the government, so there won't be any individual guarantee that we'll put on them.
Someone's asked a question about whether you can furlough someone on maternity leave. The answer is no, because if they're on maternity leave, they will be receiving statutory maternity pay, and therefore they can't be furloughed. It's only when they're due to come back from maternity leave that you could consider furloughing them. And one other matter I would bring to everyone's attention is if you are furloughing either any staff or directors, you must ensure that you can prove that that person wasn't working for the business during the period of furlough. And I think the revenue will look at that closely where they do carry out any inquiries. And that includes dealing with business emails, phone calls, etc. With the director, he can deal with business compliance matters, accounts, tax, filings, etc., but can't deal with any remunerative aspects of the business at all. So I think that's quite important. Don't claim if you're involved in any remunerative services of the business.
Okay. Right. Someone's asked if we're going to start the claims for clients. Yes, we are. We're full flow in doing the claims. If that's to do with the furlough claims, if it's talking about the bounce back loan claims, we can help with that, and we'll be talking to clients about that now and early next week as to what help they want. But yes, we can submit everything for people that we're helping. Absolutely.
Neil, there's a question coming for the bounce back loan. What's the minimum amount that you could borrow? Well, I think you mentioned it's between £2,000 and £5,000. So the minimum is 2,000. You can borrow up to 50,000. Did I say 5? 50,000. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. Between 2 and 50.
Yeah.
And there is this chance of a turnover test within that. So when it was announced, it got picked up that the amount you can borrow was potentially going to be limited to 25% of the business's turnover. So £100,000 turnover business will only be able to apply for £25,000. And I'm assuming that that turnover is going to be the amount excluding VAT. So that would limit some businesses, yeah. Someone else has asked about self-employed grants. They are going to be notified by the Inland Revenue sometime, supposedly in the middle of next month. HMRC will be writing to everybody they think are eligible, probably with the amount as well, and asking them to complete a simple form, claim to agree the claim and supply the bank details. That's not going to be out, I don't think, for a few weeks yet. For our clients, we've been working on the data we've got and are practically ready to write to you with what grant we think you will be eligible for. And that should be coming out certainly within, well, this week. It'll be coming out this week.
Someone's asked if bounce back loans are available through any particular bank current business account as with existing loans. I mean, it's being made available through most of the major lenders, including a number of the new type of lenders, the online banks. But I would always recommend that you contact your existing business bank first, as they will obviously have all your details and be familiar with your business. So that's always going to be your first point of call for this loan.
Yes, I have heard, that's absolutely right, Barry. I have heard that if you switch to a subsidiary bank, they are swamped in dealing with their existing customers, and so you're going to be put to the bottom of the pile and take even longer to get anything through. So yeah, stick to your main bank first.
Just jumping on a question here. How lengthy is the process to unfurlough an individual? How quickly from notifying Davis Grant, if acting as my agent, can an employee get back to work? So the minimum period to furlough someone is 3 weeks. So if someone has been furloughed for that period, you can then effectively unfurlough them and tell them you want them to come back to work. If you can then just send us an email just saying this is the date that they've been unfurloughed from. You don't have to wait for us to get any authorization from HMRC. Just kind of let us know what date, and then they can start kind of straight back to work.
Just to give you an example on that case, I had one client who had furloughed all the staff. The office is shut, but he needed that particular member of staff to come in and deal with supplier payments and certain amount of admin. So he unfurloughed her for 1 day. She came into the office, dealt with everything, brought it up to date, and now she's back on furlough again. And as long as when you can take them off furlough for as short a period as you want, but when they go back on furlough, they must be back on for at least 3 weeks to qualify for a furlough before you then take them off again, if you so wish to.
We've had another question about the bounce back loans and asking if they are based on turnover. For example, a very small turnover of £10,000 per annum, what would the loan be? It isn't yet clear if it is going to be based on turnover. Even the HMRC website is silent on that. It's just saying between £2,000 and £50,000 is the loan. So we don't yet know. It was just a rumour that went out at the beginning that the amount of loan was going to be limited as a percentage of turnover. I think that there will be some kind of validation for the amount being applied for, because it wouldn't make sense for them to give a £50,000 loan, for example, to a £10,000 turnover business. So that there must be within the system some kind of criteria. If they've got a very light touch to approving them, there needs to be some kind of sensibility check if you're not submitting accounts or forecasts like you would do with a full CBILS loan. So we don't yet know, but I would have thought it's a sensible approach to take. But as I said, the details are very, very thin on the ground for this, and probably, well, certainly before Monday, they will let us know. So watch this space for that. Okay.
Just before we finish, I'd just like to reiterate that anyone who qualifies for the rate support grant, if you haven't had any payment or contact from your local authority, you should contact them to make sure that they have got you on their list, i.e. you qualify under the small business rate relief, less than 15,000, or your business rates is less than 50,000 and you're within one of the sectors that qualifies for grant of up to £25,000. So and that is a grant. It's not repayable, so definitely worth pursuing if you fall into the relevant criteria.
Also, on the self-employed grants that we spoke about earlier, the initial period for furlough was 3 months, and that was the initial period for the self-employed grants. The self-employed grant hasn't yet been extended to 4 months to match with furlough, but I would expect they would do that to be equitable, but that's not been announced yet either.
Just to follow up on Barry's point, again, clients hadn't appreciated that the grants, the rate grants, are also taxable in the same way that the furlough grants are. So the £10,000 that you're receiving, again, corporation tax will be owed on that amount.
Or income tax if you're not a company.
Okay. Last call for questions. I think there's no point in hanging around and taking up everybody's time if there are no more questions to be answered. We are going to put a little survey up at the end, so I'd be grateful if you could complete that. A bit of feedback is always very welcome. And I suppose in terms of general business, we're all getting to grips with this new norm and working out what to do on the way out when it happens. So we will be putting out some more help with that on subsequent webinars. This one, we just wanted to concentrate on a quick update and some details on the furloughing. So thank you all very much for listening. I think we will call it a day there. And Nick is going to put up the poll. There it is. Thank you all very much. Keep well, and hope business is good for you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.